I thought prohibition was an unjust law, and I still do. I came to Chicago with $40 in my pocket. My son is now 12. I'm still married, and I love my wife dearly. We had to make a living. I was younger than I am now and thought I needed more. I didn't believe in prohibiting people from getting the things they wanted. I thought prohibition was an unjust law, and I still do.
Okay, so who is Al Capone? But before we answer that question, let's ask another question. How much did Al Capone weigh? Yeah, that's a good question. Get on the scales, Mr. Capone. And what will the scales come up? Well, if this information is correct, Al Capone is weighing in at approximately 250 pounds. So we're going to ask that very same question for another individual. And who might that be? Well, that would be none other than Fatty Arbuckle. That's right, Fatty Arbuckle, the big actor in the silent era who had a scandal. And because of his scandal, he was thrown out of Hollywood. Well, he didn't really need to be thrown out of Hollywood, because Fatty Arbuckle, who incidentally weighed, guess what? About 250 pounds. Isn't that something? That good old Fatty Arbuckle weighs about 250 pounds. Pretty curious, isn't it? That both Al Capone and Fatty Arbuckle weigh approximately 250 pounds. So you probably are saying, well, that's not enough. Okay, I'm with you. I'm not against you now. I've never been against you. I'm just against these liars and these hoaxers. So don't make me your enemy. Don't make me public enemy number one. Public enemy number one, Mr. Capone and Fatty Arbuckle. So you're probably still saying something like, well, that's not quite enough for me. It's good. You might be right. And I'll take that. I'll take that. You don't have to give me 100% track record, success record, accuracy record. I don't care. I just like making videos, and I like exposing liars. So let's take a look at another thing, and that would be like an approximate time period. So what is the time period we're talking about? Well, for Fatty Arbuckle, we're looking at his birth at around 1887. And his death, supposed death, which never really happened at that time in that way, supposedly 1933. Now that's significant. The 33 is always significant. But it's going to be even more significant here when I tell you a little bit more. So there's Mr. Capone, big gangster everybody feared, or loved, by the way. Sometimes they loved him because he was sweet. And you have Capone, the character, the fictional character, being born in 1889, dying 1947. So in the hoax history, the fictional character will outlive the actor, which means basically Fatty Arbuckle didn't die in 1933. So why is it that the hoaxers wanted everybody to fear people like Al Capone? Why? And you know, the movies that were made in the 30s and 40s were a lot about gangsters or psychopaths who want to go out and shoot and kill people or come into your house and hold you hostage. But there was a great segment of movies, the gangster movies. Why? Why get everybody psyched out on gangsters? Why? Well, like I told you, 1933 is a little more significant than the so-called fake death of Fatty Arbuckle. 1933 is the year that all lawful government ceased. In the third month, on the third day, or the third third of the month, which would make it the 9th, there was the collapse of all government. Why? Because the United States of America went bankrupt. And the United States of America went bankrupt intentionally with all the war hoaxing. And you can see my original video that I did, the very first one ever, called The 80-Year War Cycle. And that's on War Backwards is Raw, R-A, War Backwards is Raw, R-A. It's the very first video I made. So you can find it way back in my log of videos on War Backwards is Raw. But because of the intentional war hoaxing, the lawful U.S. government is busted, broke. And if this ever got out to the public, it would cause all kinds of commotion. And it would not allow for the hoaxsters to set up and use on the people a hoax government system. And that is why we had care actors like Al Capone, Old Scarface, and a whole host of other phony mobsters. And for almost a whole generation, Americans lived in fear of mobsters. And while they were in fear of mobsters, or by the way, in praise of mobsters, no one would suspect that the real gangsters, the real mobsters, were the ones sitting in the seats of government, pretending to be lawful government officials. Hence, the Hollywood creation of gangsters. So we go back to the original. Why, who is Al Capone? None other than Fatty Arbuckle. So let's hear Al Capone speak again on this recreation. By the way, there's he's not a great uncle, and whoever this hoaxer is, it comes up with a book about my great uncle or my Uncle Al. That's nonsense because he was a fictional character. But anyhow, this is a recreation, supposedly, of maybe what his voice sounded like. It would have actually just simply been the voice of Fatty Arbuckle.
I came to Chicago with $40 in my pocket. My son is now 12. I'm still married and I love my wife dearly. We had to make a living. I was younger than I am now and thought I needed more. I didn't believe in prohibiting people from getting the things they wanted. I thought prohibition was an unjust law, and I still do.
Okay, so $40 in your pocket. End of video.